first of all, I really want to thank everybody for taking part in this deal. Obviously, it's the first time that we've tried something like this. So I'm going to ask everybody for your patience as we try to work out any issues that crop up. I'm sure that there will be some sooner or later. Also, there are a few people that I'd like to introduce. First of all, Steve Wade, my co-host and partner in crime here on the podcast. Steve Wade. Steve, are you with me?
I think so. You hear me?
I hear you.
All right.
All right. You figured out how to unmute yourself. Very good.
I'm getting to be pretty good at this stuff.
Well, judging from, let's see, you and I have recorded, I think, 2 episodes of the podcast using Zoom.
Yes. No,
and
3.
Has it been 3?
3.
Okay. All right. We've recorded 3 episodes of the podcast using Zoom. Each and every time we've had fairly substantial issues. Well, substantial issues to start off with, and when we figured out what they were, you had a mute button that was turned down or whatever. The next week, I had my headphones plugged into the wrong port. So, but so far, this is going well tonight, and you haven't messed anything up. So,
well, that's good for me. But to be honest with you, Rick, this is quite an adventure. I'm very, very very surprised and pleased at the number of folks that have joined us here tonight. I hope we have I think we're going to have a very good, informative session. And this is something new for me, trust me. So I am looking forward to this.
All right. Next up, hopefully everybody is caught up on the podcast and the YouTube interviews that we've been doing. And if you are, you'll know that we've been talking to and about Lake Speed for the last couple of weeks, and the final installment will run next week. And Lake is actually on the call with us. So if you have any questions or comments for Lake, let me know via the chat option, and I'll call on you. Lake, are you with us? Mr. Speed.
You don't have Blake.
Well, I know he's on the call. He might not have. Let's see. Maybe I can unmute him myself. So let me see here.
You need to tell me how to do this unmute thing.
Oh, there we go. I got you. Hey, there we go.
But I say you have it.
Lake, you with us?
No fair. No fair.
A long time since I sent you. Steve Wade, it's been a long time since I've seen you.
Yes, sir. Lake, how you doing, my friend?
Doing wonderful. Everything's great.
Good. Glad to hear it.
Well, better yet, we have Risa Speed here with us. So
yeah. Well, you did for a while. She's gone now.
All right, cool. Also, we have Erik Quinn, who is a longtime friend of mine who worked with Motor Racing Outreach once upon a time. He's now the Chief Technology Officer for QWare, our presenting sponsor, and he also designed the Scene Vault website. And if you haven't had a chance to check that out, please do so. Erik, what's going on, my friend?
Nothing much. I'm Chief Technology Officer means that I've been pretty busy lately trying to get a company connected from all corners of the world. And I wore a sweatshirt tonight. This is just for Lake Speed. That's my MRO sweatshirt from when I was working with MRO.
All right.
And so one of my heroes who helped start MRO Lake, I appreciate that, man.
Well, thanks so much. It's maybe the biggest accomplishment in my life, maybe.
All right. So, next up, we have Peter Cellino at Centire Media. He has been instrumental behind the scenes of the podcast. His company was initially responsible for uploading the podcast. And since I took that over, Peter is now our chief cheerleader and strategist. I wish that I had a tenth of Peter's salesmanship and business sense. Peter, you with us?
I am. I do nothing. I have no responsibilities here whatsoever.
No. I think you're watching just to tell me what I did wrong later. So you and Steve and Erik keep me humble.
I'm just here to see if Steve Wade needs some bourbon delivered.
Yes, by all means.
Easy, down, boy, down.
Well, do you need problem? I'll be by tomorrow.
And finally, we have one other person who works in the sport here with us, Chris Hussey, who worked with Mark Martin and Roush Racing. He was Ward Burton's crew chief at Bill Davis Racing, and he was also Adam Petty's crew chief. Chris, are you with us? Chris. Okay.
He was there in the picture, and now his picture went blank.
Uh-oh.
Lake Speed.
Is that Chris?
I'm trying to unmute him, but he's not being unmuted. So, all right. Well, we'll try again later. So, all right. Well, listen, I don't know exactly how this is going to go. I think what we're going to do now is just open it up for any questions you guys might have for me or Steve or Lake or whoever. I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody. Let's see how that's going to work. And yeah, I'm going to mute everybody. Yeah, I'm going to mute everybody. If you have a question, okay, let me know via the chat message, via the chat app, and we will go from there. So let me close out of that so I can see the chat. All right. All right. It looks like Josh Ward has a question. So Josh, if you will unmute yourself.
Yeah.
And ask your question.
This is really cool. Thanks for putting this together, Rick.
No problem,
and,
man. I'll tell you what,
yeah.
I've about had a stroke all day worrying about it. So.
I'm in Zoom meetings every day, so I feel your pain. But no, this is a better type of Zoom meeting. Lake, I was a longtime fan of Robert Yates Racing in that 28 car. What was it like driving that car for those 3 or 4 races? And what was your experience like driving that car compared to some of the other cars that you drove thereafter?
Hey, man, listen to the podcast next week.
Haven't had a chance to, but I listened to last week's and I was hoping you guys were going to cover it. But
oh yeah, definitely.
All right, cool. But well, no spoiler alerts then. But just what was your perspective and what was it like? It was such a dark time in '93, you know, and you know, a couple different drivers went in that car and mixed results. I don't think anyone had really any expectations, but you know, what type of pressure did you face driving that car? And I think you're on mute.
Okay, let me see if I can unmute him.
No, man.
There you go, Lake. I got you.
All right, good. I appreciate that. And
Okay.
take all the help I can get. Well,
You and me both, brother.
it was an interesting thing there. The way that deal came down was I just switched over from General Motors cars to Fords, and I'd bought a used engine from Robert, and his guys helped me with plumbing and, you know, changing everything over to the Ford stuff. And then we'd gone to some races, and we'd run faster than Robert thought we ought to be running with what he sold us. And so I had his attention. He was kind of paying attention to me a little bit. And then it so happened that when all this happened, my sponsorship deal I had was only 10 races, the first 10 races. So it was a week after the, after the accident. We were at Talladega, and he comes walking up to me I was down there waiting to go out and qualify, and asked me if I'd be interested in driving the car for him for maybe one race, maybe a few races, possibly the whole season. He said, we don't know for what's going to happen. And I said, well, it just so happens that this is my last race right now that we have anything to do. Yeah, I would love to do that. That'd be awesome. And, you know, I had a world of respect for Robert and his bunch. Obviously, they were on the top of the game. And so, you know, I'm going to spoiler alert you a little bit here anyway. He said, call me. He said, well, let me talk to you, you know, next week, Monday, we'll call and talk. You know, we did. He said, well, we do want you to drive the car. He said, but we're going to get us a road course ringer to put in the car for Watkins Glen. And I said, Robert, you do know I'm a world champion road racer, don't you? He said, what? And I told him, I said, yeah, I won the world championships in karting. That's all I ever did was road race before I came to stock cars. He said, well, I don't know about that. He said, when's the last time you were at Watkins Glen? I said, I don't know. Been a few years. We hadn't had sponsorship to be able to go up there. He said, I'm going to have to talk to some people about this. I'll call you back. So they called back later and said, yeah, we're going to give you a chance. So we go up there. And yes, there was an amazing amount. If you want to call it pressures, responsibility is probably more for me, considering everything that happened with Davey and the fan support he had and whatever. First time I went on the racetrack was pretty emotional for me too, understanding where I was and whose car I was in and the circumstances, the situation, everything. But like I said, I did a lot of road racing. So I went out, ran practice. You know, they told me before I go out, you know, no pressure. You know, we know that you're going to feel a lot of pressure here, and just go out and be easy. Take your time, go around there. He said, I think since you were here, they put this bus stop thing back there. He said, but if you somehow or another you don't get breakdown fast enough, you know, you can go straight through it. You just have to stop and go. I said, okay. We went out. So I went out and ran and practiced a little bit. When I came in, Robert came up the window and he said, did you go through that bus stop? I said, yeah. I said, dang. He said, you're way up here on the chart speed-wise. I said, I'm just taking it easy, And so the guys worked on the car and we worked on it. Long story short, we qualified fourth, I think. And after qualifying, he said to me, he said, Blake, we've never qualified in the top 10 at a road racetrack before. I told Robert, I said, Robert, I'm still being really careful. We can go a lot faster. And so anyway, went on, and you know, when the race started and the fans are going crazy and everybody's going crazy, and it was an amazing weekend for Lake, because I was doing something that I've been doing all my life. And the first time I'd ever gotten in a car, you know, really top-notch car that would run. And race started and we were the fastest thing there. And the transmission broke. And Ford Motor Company went crazy and everybody went crazy. Is like, where'd this guy come from or something? I don't know. It was an amazing thing. And it catapulted us on into the 15 car and all like that. So that's kind of the way it came down. And I just looked at it as an awesome opportunity. And, you know, we ran up front every race and had a chance to win. You know, just stuff happens.
Thanks so much, Lake. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right. Jeff Markowski, do you have a question?
Okay, you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, Lake, you talked about switching manufacturers from Oldsmobile to Ford. As a small independent team, did you get much manufacturer support in doing that?
No.
Okay, next question.
like zero practically, you know.
None whatsoever.
No.
Did you get any support from the other Ford teams when you would test and things like that?
What do you mean by that?
Well, did the Ford or Oldsmobile teams share information amongst other smaller teams back then?
We were always a small enough team that nobody really talked to us too much.
Okay. By the way, Steve, Rick, thanks for doing this. This is a really great thing you're doing, and I appreciate and like the podcast as well.
All right. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Billy Brittingham, I believe you have a question. Let's see.
Crickets.
You're muted, Billy. You have to unmute yourself.
Okay, I got him.
I want
Billy?
to start. Yep, I want to start by thanking Rick and Steve every week. I look forward to the podcast. As an essential worker right now, we don't have a whole lot looking forward to every week, so you're a bright spot to my week. Lake, what was it like driving for someone as iconic as Bud Moore?
Oh boy, I tell you, that's a loaded question. It was really an honor to have Ford Motor Company get so excited and want me in the car and put me in that car and whatever. But our little team had put together some really good cars. I mean, really good cars. And Bud's guys were pretty much old school, and they were still struggling in some areas. And so when I got there, you know, I have to be careful what I say. They were really good to me, but they didn't want to listen too much because they felt like they kind of knew what they were doing. I had a world of respect for them because they'd won a lot of races and done really well forever and ever. But it was a struggle to know that I had some stuff at the shop, at my shop, that was better than what I was driving there. And that just became a struggle. You know, I tried to talk them into being a little more aggressive on things and trying to get with it. And but just, he was set in his old ways and he wasn't doing it. So that's why I wound up finally parting ways. I couldn't handle the frustration anymore.
Okay. All right. I believe, Matt Miles, you have a question. Is that for everybody or is that specifically for Lake? Matt, are you with us?
By the way, Bud took better care of me than anybody ever did. You know, he was great to me. Ford was great to me.
Okay.
When
I'm
you're
not
super competitive, is really tough to beat your head against the wall.
all right. I don't believe Matt is with us. I think he's trying to join back in or whatever. Chris Wolf, are you with us? I
Yes,
think
sir.
you're okay. What's your question?
So the 1989 Pepsi 400 was my second actual NASCAR race I had ever gone to. I was about 14 years old at the time. And it was my first speedway. My home track was actually Watkins Glen. I'm from upstate New York in a small town near Watkins Glen. But one of the most distinctive things that I remember is Lake had a tumble down the backstretch, and the scary sound of the car hitting every time it tumbled. I distinctly remember that, and I was sitting on the front stretch grandstand, and it was kind of scary, the sound that you could hear echoing all the way to the front stretch. And I was just curious what Lake might remember from that day. I do remember that him and DW had a pretty good draft going, and they were moving up through the field. And I don't remember. I mean, that was a couple of days ago, so I don't remember exactly how they got separated. But I do remember Lake having a heck of a tumble down the backstretch. So I was just curious what he might remember from that race. Thank you, and thank you for doing this, guys.
You're welcome.
you.
There's one problem. I've only flipped and rolled down the back straightaway one time. Thank God, one time. But that was at Daytona in a July the 4th race. So I'm not sure about your memory, but something's gone a little haywire. But
Oh, that's what he was saying, Lake.
Yeah.
Sterling and I got together.
Yeah, that's what he was saying.
Oh yeah, it was quite a mess. You know, you're running with the front group and everybody was dashing around a little bit. Next thing I knew, I saw the right front of the car going up in the air and I said, oh gosh, here we go. You knew something big was fixing to happen. And she rolled down the back straightaway, like I said, flipped about 5 or 6 times. And the whole time it looks like it would be really something spectacular. And it is spectacular, but it really doesn't hurt. I mean, you're just sitting in there as sudden stops are the ones you worry about. So I'm sitting there holding the steering wheel and it's flipping. And I'm thinking to myself, I just got my eyes closed and I'm saying, please don't anybody hit me, because because that was what you worry about, is somebody else coming along and hitting you at about 100 miles an hour faster than you were going. But we were lucky.
It was one of the scariest sounds that you could. I mean, I never heard anything like that before, so it was kind of scary, and it's embedded in my memory. So thank you very much for your answer.
You're welcome.
Hey, Chris
Yes, sir.
Wolf, are you wearing your jacket?
I'm not, because it's kind of warm in here right now.
Come on, man.
But I do appreciate the jacket.
All right. Hallie Emery,
Yes.
are you with us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. Got a quick question for you, Lake. With your karting championship background, I know that a lot of times, a lot of those guys go to Formula One. You raced in the class with Ayrton Senna. Did you have any aspirations, or did you have any call-outs for people? I don't remember you covering it on the podcast, but did you have any calls or aspirations to go to Indianapolis and race in the 500 at all?
Yeah, I did. As a matter of fact, when I decided I was going to get out of karting and get into professional racing, that was my goal, was to get out of karts and go into something that was professional, because there was probably 6, maybe 8 guys that I raced against in Europe and the karts that within 24 months they were driving a Formula One car. And talked to a few of them afterwards, after they were in them and whatever. And one guy in particular I got to be a little bit of a friend with, long distance over the pond. He said, man, it's just like a big go-kart, just like a big go-kart. And I thought about that, and I was actually pursuing the open wheel stuff when I got a call from a total stranger that introduced me to Humpy Wheeler. And next thing I know, I'm at a stock car race, and I already had a contract in hand, getting ready to sign to do, I guess, a Super V or something. It was underneath, a series down, kind of like our Xfinity series, I guess. When I went up there, and man, I was shocked when I went to a NASCAR race and saw how much publicity there was, how big the crowds were, the sponsorship levels, just everything. And at that time, the open wheel stuff was like really on life support. They didn't even know if they were going to have a season the next year. Their whole series was a mess. So I decided, I don't know anything about stock cars. This is going to be really hard, probably impossible for me to do any good in it. I think this is a challenge I want to go after. That was it.
Awesome. Thank you, Lake.
Thank you.
Okay. Chase Whitaker, are you with us?
Hey, sir.
All right.
I am, sir.
I believe you had a question for Mr. Speed.
Yeah, Lake, let's go back a little bit in time. I know you talked a little bit about this on the podcast. And a mutual friend of ours, Russ Thompson, I believe, has some memories from that day as well. The 1980 ARCA race at Daytona, with the whole cluster. I don't mean to touch a nerve all these years later, but it has been 40 years. Hopefully we can talk about it.
Oh, yeah. I still got a recording of the end of it in my desk drawer.
So when that thing was said and done, obviously then and now it really looks just totally odd, but did that still have a really beneficial effect for your career, that despite being kind of jobbed on that deal, that people took notice of the fact that you were running at those speeds, even at ARCA level? Or was it neutral, or did it, I'm curious about what impact you felt like that effort that day had going forward from there, whether that was a good thing for you.
I don't really know. I'll be honest with you. I can't say that I know of anything that was positive that came from it, other than just my crew and myself and the people that were involved directly with me. We knew, yes, we can do this. And this was just our first shot out of the box. We had led most of the race and had everybody but one guy a lap down. And when they had a big wreck there right at the last of the race, there was trash all over the racetrack. There were still vehicles on the racetrack when we came back around. They'd already sent my crew to Victory Lane. And all I had to do is just get back to the start finish line, and the race was over. And by the time I got to the where you pulled down pit road, looked up there, and the flagman's got a green flag and a checkered flag in his hand. And reality is they knew I'd run over some trash and cut a tire down. So, you know, I only had one rear tire that had air in it. And I think Kyle Petty had won the race, his first stock car race ever, the year before. And here we were, another first timer comes to the track, and their series champion was the only guy who was in the lead lap with me. So that was my first and last ARCA race. But it was kind of like, well, welcome to stock car racing. This is not all straight up. If you ever, did you ever hear the announcement when Dick Brooks was the radio announcer and everything? He had some few choice things to say about it. That was very cool. That's why I have that tape in the drawer. I'll listen to it every once in a while.
All right.
Thank you, Lake.
Thank
Cool.
you.
Good deal. Anybody else have any questions for Lake? I don't see any on the chat. So we'll going once, going
Chris
twice.
Perry stuck his hand up.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, Chris Perry.
All right. Chris, what you got?
Well, you guys can hear me, right?
Yes.
First of all, thank you for putting this together. This is awesome. I love the podcast, love listening to it every week, love learning everything that I can about the history of the sport. So I guess my question kind of goes to, you know, Rick, it can go to Steve, Lake, and even Chris Hussey. Do you think, and I guess with Lake saying that Bud was kind of complacent, do you think that's what eventually, how do I explain this, led their team's demise? You know, they just weren't willing to change with the times.
Well, I don't know that I would call them complacent. I think that they were just a small team. I think that they were used to doing things a certain way and had done them that way for a long time. And certainly Lake drove for him, so he would be able to speak to it more than I would. But I think that once the really big teams like the Hendrick Motorsports, the Roush Racing, and teams like that, I think that's when you started to see the Petty Enterprises of the world, the Bud Moores of the world. That's when you saw them start to kind of struggle a little bit. Lake, is that close?
Yeah, it's pretty close. I think, you know, when you look at the technology, I think it had more to do with it than anything. The guys that are on the top level and have continued to be there have been extremely aggressive technology-wise. And they've spent money. They've spent a lot of money on technology to get ahead. And the guys that either didn't understand it or didn't recognize the value there. Let me give you an example. Every team out there has got engineers now, multiple engineers. When I went down to Bud's, they sent an engineer from Ford Motor Company down to help the race team. He was the first, as far as I know, the first team that had an engineer. Was a young guy, was super nice guy, had no background in stock car racing. So he's coming down there evaluating everything and trying to help. I came down one day right before we were going to Daytona, and I guess that was '94, and they had built a new car. And I'd go down every week, you know, once a week, and go down there and check on everything. I walked in there one day and I looked under the hood of this new car, and I did a double take and I went, what? The A-arm, the upper A-arm was turned at about a 45-degree angle instead of straight, 90 degree. And I asked Donnie, I said, Donnie, what the heck is this? He said, Engineer says that's the way it's got to be. I said, you got the backup car still? He said, oh, yeah, we got the backup car. I said, good. It's because we were fixing to go test. Well, come back for the test, get out of the test, and I walk in the garage. There's the car, both cars are there, and I went over and looked. It was back like it's supposed to be. I said, Donnie, what's going on here? He said, guy said he must have put a number in wrong or something in the computer, so they had to go back and change. So that kind of stuff probably put a lot of the teams that didn't have a lot of money to expend, or maybe the fourth, I don't know. All I can say is I'm sure if I was in Bud shape, I wouldn't have wanted the guy around the shop myself, you know.
Right.
Some of these other teams, bigger teams, have hired people away from the IndyCar guys or sports car stuff where they've had a lot of racing experience before they came to stock cars. So, you know, Chris and some of the other guys that have been active probably have they know more about that than I do, because that was my first taste of it and the only experience I had with it. So, you know, what do I know?
Okay. All right. Anybody else for Lake?
I think Steve's talking, but he's muted.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Boy, I like the mute option on Steve. I've been looking for one of those for 30 years now. All right. All right. Anybody else for Lake?
You're not going to turn him loose, huh?
No, absolutely not.
He's talking about he's burning that thing up.
Uh-oh. All right. Lake, if you want to stick around, you're more than welcome to, but I think Risa might have dinner on the table that you were saying earlier. But it looks like Jeff Murkowski has a question for Steve Wade or myself. So fire away, Jeff.
Or Chris Hussey. What's the camaraderie like in the garage area these days compared to what it was in the 70s, 80s, or 90s? Amongst media and teams with NASCAR.
Well,
all the way around. I got the answer to that one. It's not even close. It's not even close to what it used to be between the teams and the media and just anybody you want to name, even the officials, as far as I'm concerned. The reason is that the sport got big enough to the point where technology took over. Now, when technology took over, and I hate to use the word intimate, but that's what it was, the relationships between competitors and the media and other competitors started to break up. And the reason it started to break up is because technology made everything so different. When I say technology, I mean you didn't have to go up and talk to a driver to get the story. You didn't have to do that. All you had to do was sit in the media center and wait for NASCAR to deliver you the notes or bring that competitor into the media center for a press conference. You didn't have to go find him and talk to him. They brought him to you. Well, that makes a big, big difference. I know that, speaking from the media point of view, that makes a big difference because, yes, you get all the news that you can give to fans. No question about that. But when you stop and think about it, when you used to know that driver, like I knew Lake, to get information from him, we got to be a bit closer than these guys are ever going to be now because they're separated by that wall of technology. They don't have to do that anymore. And consequently, drivers don't know anything about the media guys. Media guys don't know much about the driver guys, and the competitor guys and crew guys don't know much about anybody else. They just come in, they do their job, and go home. There was a time when they come in, do their jobs, meet the media guys who came in to talk to them, and they would, exchange information, and they got to know them. Hey, I know this guy. I know Tom Higgins. Okay? I know Bob Myers. I know this guy. And I can stop and just chat with him, and he won't put it on the record. We can be friends. And, that's the way it was. It's not that way anymore. I think there's a two-edged sword here. I think that the information you get now is much greater and much quicker than you ever had in the past. But I also believe that the camaraderie and the friendships between the people in the garage yard and the people in the media center has changed greatly. And in a way, that's very sad.
Do you think there's too much media now?
I think it's too much media in the sense that we don't have, and I want you to understand me here. I'm not saying the media that we have today is not legitimate. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the media we have today is not a dedicated media. You can remember the days when every newspaper from Richmond all the way to Daytona Beach, from Los Angeles to Chicago to New York Times, they had a racing writer. They had a racing writer. Some of them went to 5 races a year. Some of them went to 20, 25, 26. Don't have that anymore because the newspapers, of course, are not covering racing like they did anymore. But the websites are. But then the websites are not dedicated racing writers in the sense that they're not in there week in and week out to the point where I think all of them can be so familiar with the competitors of the day. Don't misunderstand me. A lot of them are. And you and I both know we read guys that do stuff and gals that do stuff regularly. But I'm just saying that's not the majority anymore. I mean, there are hundreds and thousands, there might be 1,000 websites on NASCAR that, Jeff, you can go and look at.
Right.
See if you'll recognize the name on there. There are people on websites that don't even go to races. I'm not condemning it. I'm just saying that's the way it is.
Well, speaking of dedicated media, what was it like working with David Poole?
Oh boy, let's see. I think our time's about running out
We
here.
can be here all David Poole was an excellent racing writer. He was just a personality unto himself, shall we say.
Well played.
Okay. All
Well,
right.
very well played.
Well, Jeff, speaking from my vantage point, being in the
May
Busch
I
Series.
interrupt for a minute, man? Jeff just made my point.
Hey, man, I'm talking.
Jeff just made my point about how it used to be. He knew David Poole.
Yeah.
All right?
Yeah.
I actually did know David Poole.
I'm sure you did. And my point being, though, you can remember a guy like that from David Poole. I could go here to a bunch of racing fans in any racing track and say, can you name me David Poole? They don't know David Poole. They don't know any of those guys who transcended the times. You did. That's my point.
Very good. Go ahead, Rick.
Well, speaking from my perspective, in the Busch Series, when I was in the Busch Series in the late 90s, early 2000s, from my understanding, it was what the Winston Cup garage had been maybe 10, 20 years before that. And, Bill Kaiser, who's on this call, I would consider him to be a friend of mine, but he was also a competitor. He worked for another newspaper. And before the race, I think he and I were we were on our own. We chased our stories. We tried to get our scoops. But afterwards, because some of the standalone Busch Series races were not, some of the standalone Busch Series tracks were not up to speed on their media facilities, we basically had to help each other out getting post-race quotes. And so he would, I 1 week I might take positions 2 through 5 and he might get 6 through 10. And we would chase those drivers down after the race, and then we would get together and share our tape. And I would play my tape. He would record what I had. He would play his, and I would record what he had. And that's how we did things back then. So it was a collaborative effort up to a point, but we also tried very hard to beat each other when it came to getting the scoop, so to speak. So today, I don't know that there are any scoops anymore, because when information gets out, it's out, and there's no way to hide it. And once it gets out, it's instantaneously
It's retweeted.
Yeah, it's on 50 different tweets.
Social media, boom.
Yeah. So let's see. Any other questions on here? Let's see. I don't know. Anybody else have any other questions? Okay. All right. Well,
If y'all don't have any questions for me, I'm gonna go eat some dinner.
All right, man.
Yeah, let's go right ahead.
Enjoyed it, and
thank you, sir.
y'all have a good evening.
All right, man.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Lake.
Bye bye.
Okay. All right. Let's see. Phil, do you have a question? Phil Alloway.
Hi, Rick.
Hey, man.
Hi, Rick. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Excellent. It's just a real random thing. Actually, your sponsor, Brian Cal, was one of my best friends. He was my basically the first fellow race fan I ever met, and he's the one who introduced me to Winston Cup scene in the mid-90s.
Okay.
I remember back then his parents had a subscription, and I was looking through one of the issues, and I noticed that in '95 they had scheduled a bush race that was supposed to be at Orange County in Rougemont, North Carolina, but it ended up getting canceled. Would either you or Steve know what happened to cause that?
This is yours, Rick.
Well, actually, I wasn't on the Busch Series circuit at that point, so I am not quite familiar what was going on at that time. I would assume that it just had to do with simple finances. Were they able to come up with the purse at the time? That would be a guess. Maybe Bill Kaiser. Maybe you might have an answer to that. But yeah, that would be my educated guess, was that they were having a hard time being able to guarantee the purse.
If I remember correctly, that's why Hickory ended up getting the boot after '98.
Yeah, I don't know about Hickory, but I was at the last race at Hickory, the last Busch Series race. I think that came down to a safety issue, because that was the race where Kevin Grubb went into the pits, and they didn't have a pit wall, and he literally drove into his pit crew and knocked Todd Wilkerson off the top of the pit box. Todd fell off, broke his arm pretty badly. So that was most definitely a safety issue at Hickory, and I think South Boston was in the same predicament. Those two tracks, I loved to race there, but they had some issues with safety.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
Hey,
that's
Rick.
what was going on there. Hey, man.
Hey, Rick, let me chip in. I think I remember what went down with Orange County. I think it was partially finances. It was also partially, for years they had issues with like plumbing and drainage at the facility. And I believe the county finally just, put their foot down and said, fix these problems or we're shutting you down. And they shut them down.
Yeah.
That's what caused the race to disappear. Excuse me.
All right. All right. Cool.
Thank you.
Let's see. Chris Hussey, are you with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. All right.
Yeah, this is new for me. So
well, it's new for me too. So it sounds like Chase Whitaker has a question for you.
I think Chris is muted again there, so hopefully he can get back to this. So
let me get
first. Good to see you, buddy. Chris and I've traded a lot of messages. Appreciate him being on here. But the one thing we've never talked about a lot is as you rose through the ranks, working in the back of the shop, if you will, and then going over the wall, and then ultimately becoming a crew chief. Is there any particular role along the way, or any particular team that really sticks out that you really enjoyed? Probably more over the others.
No, not really any more of that. It's the people, more so than the team. It's some of my, it's back to Jeff's question a while ago. First of all, let me say I didn't know Steve Wade. I knew he could write, but I had no idea he could talk that much. But
you don't know him very well.
Steve kind of
hard to get a point across.
Steve and Rick kind of answered that question about the team camaraderie and your competitors and your camaraderie with those guys from a press standpoint and accessibility to new tech.
Chris?
Chris froze.
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh.
Chris Hussey. Okay. All
Well,
right.
we're not quite there, are we?
Going off on Steve Way is not a good thing, apparently.
All right, man. Well, maybe we
Thank
get
you for
Chris.
trying.
Yeah, maybe we get Chris back. A couple of people have a question. Josh Ward. Josh, are you with us?
Yeah, no, Rick, I'm just curious if you guys will be doing more of these, even as the season starts to begin in some capacity. I think these are really cool. It's great to talk to you guys and talk to Lake and everybody else. I just think it's so cool to get their perspective. It reminds me of, calling into radio shows back in the day and kind of doing the same thing, but to see the face-to-face now is awesome. So I think this is a job well done. And just really appreciate the podcast. It just brings back so many great memories in the 90s and 80s and everything. And it's a lot different now than what it was back then. So to kind of relive some of those days is really cool. So thanks for kind of resurrecting some of the history that seemed to have gone by the wayside.
Well, for me, to answer your question about doing these more regularly, yeah, I would love to do that. Hopefully, we can make it an every week thing if it works out like that. I'll be honest with you, change scares me, and certainly new things scare me. And this was something that was brand new, and based off of some of the conversations and experiences that Steve and I have had trying to get Zoom figured out. I was very nervous going into this deal, but it seems to be working out very well. And yeah, I would love to do them, if not every week, maybe every other week. Who knows? And as far as having Lake Speed on or whatever guests in the future, obviously some people are going to be more busy than others and might not get everybody on. But I think it's definitely something that we could work on. So yeah.
Thanks again, guys. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Josh.
All right. Let's see. Justin Hall wanted to know. Justin, are you with us?
Yes, sir.
Hey, man.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey.
Hey.
So, what are you thinking about the schedule? And just wanted to say, with the proximity, it's kind of ironic. Everybody clamoring over wanting North Wilkesboro back and Rockingham back. That if they were in play, they would be usable because of the distance and the situations right now.
Well, listen, the time that we're in right now is obviously unprecedented, and the people who are complaining about whatever the schedule might be, what else is NASCAR going to do? How else are they going to schedule things? I've said this on the podcast several times, but NASCAR finds itself between a rock and a hard place in this deal. And so, however they put the schedule back together, I think the Carolina centric schedule to start off with, I think that's good. Teams don't have to travel that far. So the thing that concerns me is, the tracks that might lose a date, and you feel for those tracks.
Right.
But if you're going to give a track an extra date, I think Darlington is a good one to give an extra date to.
Definitely.
Because you see very good racing there.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now, as far as the whole North Wilkesboro Rockingham issue, they could not hold races.
Right
now.
No.
It would be, number one, the facilities aren't up to speed right now. And I'm not talking about just mowing the grass.
No.
I don't know if Stephen Wilson from Save the Speedway is on here or not. I don't think he is, and y'all can tell on me if you want to. But North Wilkesboro
It's
as much
gone.
as much as I love that track, it's not going to host another race anytime
No.
soon, if ever. As much
Right.
as I hate to say that, and I think you guys know the respect that I have for history. I mean, we've doing this podcast for crying out loud, and I own 32 years of newspapers. They're sitting, a few feet from me right now. But I don't know that North Wilkesboro ever holds another race,
Yeah.
and that's a shame. I think the same goes for Rockingham.
Yeah.
Look, I'll say it. Those two tracks held races. They were reopened, and for whatever reasons, it didn't work out for them.
No.
So these people who are saying, we got to open North Wilkesboro back up, we got to open Rockingham back up. Well, you opened them back up, and nobody
showed up,
and it didn't
Yeah.
work.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Exactly.
it's one of those situations where either put up or shut up,
Yeah.
and they gave him a shot, and it didn't work out. So, what's your other option? So, yeah.
Hey, Rick, I was at that last race at Rockingham, and you're right. They had very, very few people in the grandstands.
It
It's
wasn't
actually the
half
first.
full.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say half full.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they announced. I don't remember they announced the crowd, but we kind of guesstimated maybe 10,000, and that's being real generous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, North Wilkesboro, it's in a fairly remote place, remote location, but it is at least off a 4-lane highway. But I don't. Well, have you been to Rockingham, North Wilkesboro? Justin, have you been to those tracks?
I've been to Rockingham, yes, sir,
Okay.
twice.
Well, then you know that it is literally, and I
Yeah.
mean literally, out in the middle of nowhere.
It is.
And it's off a 2-lane road, and it's not very easily accessible.
Yeah, they've widened Highway 1 to make it a little bit better, but and then you got the Interstate 73, but it's still. I mean, I know it's beyond repair. I was just saying about the what if.
Yeah, yeah. So
one last thing I was just going to say, is there anything you would have to say about the '99 Daytona Busch Race? They're going to re-air it. I see Saturday on FS1.
Well, listen, if they are re-airing a Busch race from the late 1990s, early 2000s, I'm sure, and I don't know off the top of my head who won, but I'm sure that a Cup guy won that race. And, listen, I've been worried about this Zoom meeting all day. My blood pressure's already up. So let's not be talking about a Cup guy winning a Busch race.
Hey, Rick, if you don't mind, I'm going to say the one thing about the race, the 1999 Daytona Busch race. Lake was on earlier, and Lake helped start MRO. There was an accident in that 1999. I don't want to spoiler alert. It's already happened. It happened years ago. But Andy Santerre, right? Andy Santerre broke his leg really bad in that leg, or broke his femur, and they flew him up to North Carolina to the hospital that MRO had connected with. That was the very beginning, and it gave it really jump-started MRO's fitness and rehab center, which I became a part of in 2000. So I'm a little partial to that because Andy was a good friend of MRO, and that particular crash was something that helped get the sports medicine program up and running, which I was a part of.
Wow, that's cool to know. Thank you.
So, Andy Santerre. Oh.
Andy Santerre.
And you can't say Andy Santerre without saying Sue Santerre. Yes, sir.
I'm not saying that. You said it, not me, Rick.
Well, I just looked it up, and I might have to watch that race. I might have to watch that race.
But thanks for everything, Rick and Steve, and thank you, Rick when you were there for sponsoring it.
Hey, thank you, man. Appreciate that very much.
Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it. All right. Anybody else have any other questions? Just hit me up on the chat here. So
I was going to mention, Rick, if you don't mind, about the North Wilkesboro Rockingham thing. I've been to both of those tracks, and And they are kind of in the middle of nowhere. What a lot of people don't know is a third of the people that used to go to North Wilkesboro parked right off the edge of the highway. Some of the things that drew people to that track back in the early days, and I don't want to say the early days of North Wilkesboro because it was around for a long time, but being able to go to Junior Johnson's farm, which was 6 or 7 miles up the road, was a real attraction for NASCAR people, right? And you could walk through the shop there, and then in the late 90s and the early 2000s, as TV was taking off, there was something more to the nightlife that North Wilkesboro and Rockingham could not offer. Right, this was Las Vegas coming into the mix. And again, they ran bush races in Las Vegas before they ran cup races, and people started to recognize that, you know what, I'd love to go to Buckhead down in Atlanta in the evening instead of just stay at the racetrack or go back to the hotel room. And Las Vegas kind of sped that whole thing up, and there just wasn't anything around those tracks. And you say, well, listen, Michigan's in the middle of nowhere too. You're right, but Michigan has that whole constructor manufacturer thing that they're going to keep going. So I think there's a number of reasons why those small tracks wouldn't play today. I think people would go maybe for a year, and then they'd go, you know what, there was nothing to do in the evening.
Right.
Hey, listen, North Wilkesboro has nightlife. I don't know that you want any part of it, though.
Now, wait a minute. I enjoyed that. Never mind.
Sounds like a good podcast opportunity, Rick.
Chris, hey, Eric, Chris Wolf says on the chat, he says, hey, that's the voice from the commercial.
It is.
So your fame precedes you there, buddy.
Yeah, yeah. Now you know what I look like, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Hallie Emery, I think you said that you had a question.
Yes, sir, I do. This is kind of a question that relates to the NASCAR Scene newspaper. You know that I work and deal with the NASCAR trading cards often. What relationship did the Scene paper have with the NASCAR trading cards, in particular Press Pass? For about a 10-year run, they had the cards like these that had the Scene featured on the front and the backs of the cards within the sets. And I didn't know what kind of working arrangement that you guys had as far as the paper and then the card companies.
It was a very good relationship in the fact that they appreciated Scene being what it was and worthy of a trading card. Now, we went beyond. You may know the little die-cast cars Racing Champions put out for several years, and others. We partnered with them to have Scene die-cast little bit cars as well as trading cards. So for a time there, you could get a Scene trading card, and you could get Scene die-cast cards, and you could get NASCAR Illustrated die-cast cards, and I'll work an arrangement with those people. But in time, and you probably know this better than I do, the little die-cast collectibles, as they call them, sort of died out, as did the trading cards. So that pretty much ended it for us. But today, they're still available, trading cards with us and little die-cast collectible cards for us. It was a period about 3 or 4 years that went on. And I enjoyed the heck out of it. It was a lot of fun because you had something tangible with Scene on it other than the paper. A collectible it wasn't a hat, it wasn't a T-shirt. We were the only trade paper that had a trading card and had a die-cast collectible car. It was kind of fun.
Very good. Hey, Rick.
Yes, sir.
I got more of these that are going to be on your way.
I'll never live that down.
For $10 a month on Patreon. One of these days we're going to be big time, and I won't have to beg for Patreon support every week on the podcast. I'm looking forward to that day. I'm not a salesman.
Well, I thank you guys for doing this tonight. This has really been enjoyable, and I've liked the interaction and you guys coming out and answering some really good questions. So I appreciate it, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We'll do this again for sure.
Good deal. Good deal. Last call. Anybody else?
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a question for Joe. Is that a Bob Senecker sheet metal behind you? Turn your mic on.
For Joe.
He shook his head yes. He said it.
Okay.
All right,
I thought so. I thought that was.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I thought that was an ASA sheet metal.
There you go.
There it is. Okay.
Awesome. Good deal. All right, guys.
Yes, 96 at Lakeland.
All right.
Very cool. Good deal. All right. Anybody else? Thank y'all so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
This has been fun. I can sleep tonight. We'll have to do this again.
Thank you, everybody, for participating. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys for having it.
Thanks, guys. It was awesome.
Take care.
Thank you.
Maybe next time, Rick.
Thanks, y'all.
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Good night, John Boy.